Hello, Facebook. This is a very special Facebook live broadcast tonight for Punish for Protecting Presents. I am here on location in Nassau County, Long Island. So I'm going to ask you guys to please invite your friends list because I have two very, very special guests here tonight, and we're going to talk about something just very powerful to all of you, to empower you in having more knowledge of what is going on, as we know, all across our nation and globe, whereby family court, which is clearly the gateway to child trafficking. But I have two experts here where we're going to tie together, and also where we've discovered it in Long Island, we're going to tie together the money laundering that is happening and occurring through this system. Now, many of you that follow what we do will understand that we've brought a lot out. We have frontline advocates such as David Jose, David Strait, and many others who have brought out the truth about what's really happening in the system. And most people understand, they know without a shadow of a doubt, that it is very clearly a system that has major issues. But sometimes you meet people and they're literally shocked, or they work in the system and they don't realize until you start to bring out this truth to them that they're being used as a pawn in this system. Many times you'll speak to child attorneys or opposing counsel or public defenders, and they'll clearly tell you that this system is broken. But that is an understatement. This system is not broken. This system is well-built oiled machine, that has been purposely built, and it's sad to say this, to destroy families. Now, did they go into this thinking, oh, we're going to build this system to destroy families? How could they not think that this system wasn't going to destroy families when it intentionally violates our Constitution, it violates anything legal and lawful, and it violates the very fabric of our nation's families? We're going to talk tonight with an ADA expert, and we're going to talk tonight with another expert. Well, I'll let them tell a little bit about themselves because this is absolutely fascinating. So this evening I have my good friend Vicki Gribin. Next to Vicki, I have my good friend now, Dorothy Hill. And I'm going to go sit over there with these nice ladies and have you, Vicki, would you go ahead and start? Tell us a little bit about yourself, your background, and we can tie this all together.
Sure. Thank you, Fran. I am a retired New York City police officer and a licensed New York State social worker who, for the past 5 years, has specializing in forensic social work, which is the application of law to family law issues and social justice issues. And that came from necessity, from trying to help many women that I met in my community and friends who had court cases in matrimonial court and family court, and were having CPS called on them based on fraudulent facts, the wrong rule of law applied, and attorneys who were charging them thousands of dollars to make false reports to judges, and they were losing their children. And I found a science to practice gap that exists. And from a law enforcement background, I understood that facts and evidence drive issues and adjust outcome, and that family courts and matrimonial courts were doing the exact opposite. And because states create their own policies, practices, and procedures, they think they're untouchable. But this is a human rights issue and a federal rights issue. And I have written motions, I've gotten orders for people under the ADA, and the courts are violating the Constitution, civil liberties, and Title II of the ADA. And I've already filed one civil lawsuit on my own, and I'm also filing one as a class action lawsuit in the near future.
Now, the class action is also, and what you've been filing so far, other families can join with this regarding ADA in the state of New York. I
Correct.
just want to make that clear.
Correct, in the New York State Unified Court System, correct.
Okay, and it's to go against what they're doing.
Correct,
And-
because their policies, there's a separation of powers between state and federal. Federal is a court of limited jurisdiction, but they are able to intervene when constitutional laws or federal laws are being violated by state policies, practices, and procedures. And that's what's happening. And under Title II of the ADA, cases are brought on a case-by-case basis. And so to date, only child welfare courts have had the ADA rules, universal rules applied, created by the Department of Justice. So what we need is to get the Department of Justice in to create universal rules for family courts and for access to justice in family courts that are based on facts, evidence, children's best interest, supported by social science research and a higher standard of proof and a higher standard of judicial review, so that it cannot be manipulated by unethical family members, spouses, abusers, attorneys. And the bottom line is courts are not qualified. They are qualified in family law and in criminal law, but they are not qualified when it comes to the ADA or for domestic violence, which can be economic abuse, psychological, emotional abuse, using the court system, taking away custody, making false allegations, and that's the missing piece. And it's creating a money-making business for lawyers and for vetted experts on court lists. And if you follow the money, this is become a business, not a civil rights court of equity justice.
So in fact, it is not a real court, and I emphasize that every day. It is not a real court, and that's the shocking thing. That's the shocking thing that people are like, "What are you talking about?" I mean, it looks like a court. They look like judges. It looks like, you know, litigants, and all. It's actually not a court. It's actually a for-profit private business, and it was built to do this to harm the families. In essence of having a real court, okay, a real court. This would be great, but it should be run like this. This is how you're saying it should be run. I'll give you an example. Martin Lynch is an expert in trial by jury of your peers. And we just want to take the axe to the root and get rid of these courts and just rebuild them proper, because we've all been duped for all these years. We've walked in completely deceived.
Yes.
And that's so unfair. That right there makes it a fraud. That makes it a complete fraud. However, we do have to work with something in all these crazy cases and things that happen to families, but they exasperate bad issues. So when a family splits up, instead of helping the family keep it as intact and healthy as you can, they just do all these crazy things that I see all over the country by court watching and scratching my head going, how can they keep doing this? And we have to ask ourselves, why do they keep doing this? And that's where you come into play, because you are an expert. And why don't you tell everybody a little bit about your background and how we can tie all this together with the fraudulent family court. Go ahead.
Sure. So my name is Dorothy Price Hill, and I'm actually originally from Boston. I've lived on Long Island now for about 12 years. It's a very important part of the country because we have one of the highest per capita in Nassau County and Suffolk County. I came into the system, so to speak, in 2011. When I, as a victim of domestic violence, went to the police and to other authorities, to request help in a very short-term marriage, under 4 years, but with significant evidence and police reports to build a case. Fast forward, I have attempted, to navigate the system, district court, family court, Supreme Court, on some cases that are interrelated and others that are separate. In my professional career, I worked on Wall Street for over 20 years. I went to Dartmouth College with one of our 2 New York senators, Senator Gillibrand, and my specialty over the last 4 to 5 years, very much honed on these experiences in Nassau County, is anti-fraud, also anti-money laundering prevention for large, medium, and small banks. These include credit unions, small regional banks, etc. So as an independent consultant and a leader of money laundering investigations teams with responsibility to the major bank regulators like the Federal Reserve, it has been a very, I'd say, insightful process, because I've been able to observe many of the money flows from various government agencies in and out of private organizations. And I'll give you sort of a perfect example. We talked before about the courts being private entities. These are entities where obviously they're budgeted, they're under the Judicial Department of Justice, or they're possibly under the Department of Health and Human Services with CPS, etc. New York in particular is county-based. So if you have a case in Nassau County, for example, everything is run through the county, like Department of Social Services or Child Protective Services. I believe in New York City they call it ACF. So ACF is the equivalent. And what we've done is, child support, thank you, child support, Child Protective Services, CPS. So what I have done on a few cases is really start to delve into how these various government entities and individuals work together, and then to literally trace the money flows. So I'll give you a perfect example. When we look at the Department of Social Services in Nassau County, that is under the auspices of New York State. We have a commissioner for the Department of Social Services. It's called the Children and Family. And that's at the county level. However, the oversight of any investigation, what we call the hearing, the conference, and then the hearing, for example, on child abuse allegations investigation, is done actually by New York State employees from Albany who are represented at the county level. And then what happens is, if we have instances of civil rights violations, we then have the legal right to file federal lawsuits showing and proving violations of civil rights, for example, ADA, and also in some cases, children who are in the system who have special education, what we call IEP, various services provided by public schools and or parochial or private schools. And those children are often targeted, those families are often targeted, and it's very difficult for these parents, whether it's two parents together or one single parent, to really navigate the system, because they're already dealing with complex special needs, and then they have this fraud on top of it, and that's where we are now.
It's very upsetting to me because I court watch all over the country, and well, we can kind of say court watch today. We kind of could say we court watch today. We'll put it that way. And without adding too much to it, I would just want to kind of bounce this off of you a little bit. From some of the things that I witnessed, because I've been down in Long Island a couple of times court watching a few courts down here, it's scary. It's scary to know that this entire system that I know is a fraud, it is an absolute fraud, and the three of us with having different expertise in different areas to be able to bring this all together and to use this platform of social media and TV to not just expose the deception. So we go in, most people, and I use the term loosely, citizen, but law-abiding, okay? And we go in thinking we have a good, clean background. We're doing the right thing. We just love our kids. We just want to protect our families. And the next thing you find out that this entire conglomerate, this criminal enterprise that we thought was a judicial system, is actually a total fraud. So every layer of it, they're literally, and we watched it today, these social workers, and that's no offense to you because you're a good one, you're the reason that you're the type of social worker that should be, okay, but the others that are out there, especially working through what I call child predator services, I don't care what name they want to call it, there's nothing protective about it, nothing, okay, they destroy families. When you see children like this, when you see children that can't put their head up because they're like this, that brings tears to my eyes, okay? And that shows me that they're not doing the right thing. It doesn't take much to see that they're not doing the right thing. Hold on, I just want to, some of the things that we witness, and you with your expertise in money laundering, okay, and the double dipping, and the taking money from child support while they're already getting federal funding, and they're already getting state funding, and they're already getting paid a salary, and they're already getting financial incentives. How in the world can they continue to do this when there's others like us out there that are through the system that have our eyes on what they're doing, and yet they work wink wink, nod nod with each other in a very deceptive manner, and they work together to continue this fraud.
The reason
right in front of us.
Right. So, no, that's fine. So I am a member of the Association of Certified Fraud Examiners, ACFE, and that's where the fraud investigation comes in. So in this particular example we were discussing today, when people are really not incentivized. I find many people do things based on incentive, or there's, a pot of XYZ at the end of the tunnel. For someone to take his or her own free time and really start delving into it, it's considerable, it's multifaceted, many, many layers. when we look at a simple case of a child who is removed from the custody of a protective parent, all bets are off. So CPS workers can make allegations. Someone can call the CPS hotline at 1 in the morning and say, you know, mother XYZ has done this to a child. CPS shows up the next day. Mother does not know her rights. Father is being called at work that the CPS workers are at the child's school, and it comes as a shock. So the bottom line is that you're absolutely right about the financing. Department of Social Services and ACF, CPS, these are all well-funded, well-oiled machine with many resources and a minimum standard of education and talent and skills of the people who work there. Having worked on Wall Street, what I have witnessed in CPS and in the court system is shocking. If someone on Wall Street, let's say an asset manager managing $1 billion of institutional money and high net worth, family money, firefighters pension, police pension, were to double dip. So for example, I run an asset management firm, I charge 2% fee, I get my fee, I pay for my administrative expenses, my staff, my office, etc. And then I go back to the investors and say, well, I'm going to charge you for this. Wait, I've already charged them the fee to manage the money. I don't double dip. That person would go to jail under the SEC in an investigation prosecuted by the Department of Justice on a federal felony. The same thing is happening in these public entities. No one's going to jail. No one's being held accountable. If we band together with very smart people and fraud investigators to really delve into how the money is flowing through the system, I am most certain that we will be able to bring those people within the system to justice. Again, many people work for these organizations. They go to work, they get their paycheck, they get their pension. They don't know that they're a cog in the wheel. However, we need training. We need to provide them with the materials and literally a graphic that shows them how the money flows. And again, also delve into how these elected judges, for example, in Nassau County, how they're determining the outcome of certain cases in concert, with attorneys who paid for their campaign fund. This is, again, on Wall Street. Not to say that Wall Street is perfect, because we certainly have a lot of work to do in terms of reform, but the bottom line is that they're elected, and the campaign contributions that are made is called what we call pay to play. Again, in other industries, financial services and healthcare, people have gone to jail for double dipping, for pay to play, for corruption.
It's a conflict of interest.
There you go, exactly.
So let's talk about that conflict of interest regarding the dangers and yours as a social worker to the emotional, physical well-being of these children that are being destroyed through the system claiming to protect them.
Yes. Okay. The system, first of all, social science research is how I was trained, that when you have invisible facts, intangible facts, you need to base it on social science research, medical research. That's the type of evidence-based social work fact finding that I was trained in a few years ago. And that's a 21st century approach. I became a social worker late in life after I was a police officer. Now, what they do is best interest is supposed to drive all cases and all outcomes when you have contested issues. Facts drive, and the rule of law drive outcomes to enforce civil rights. They do not, courts, I've seen it time and time again, they do not evaluate children's psychological, emotional, psychiatric, developmental needs. They strictly have standards and policies. A policy is to get a predictable outcome. And their outcome is the child healthy? Are they doing well in school? Are they being physically beaten? No, then the child is fine. Is the child afraid? But they do not have, they need a 21st century multidisciplinary approach. Comparable to what the Harvard School for the Developing Child has. These are the standards that you use, not the standards the courts are using. Right. And when you're talking about financial fraud, I'm talking about, I know that exists, I'm talking about the fraud that exists upon the court when facts are being told this child is fine, or this parent is a fit parent, this parent has psychiatric issues, which they are not substantiated by evidence. Things are not transparent. Fraud upon the court, when you find the first fraud upon the court, all the rest of the orders are also void and unconstitutional, and the entire family and children are the family unit is a unit of society, and that is why we have special courts and special laws, but they're not being protected. Children are not being protected. They are the future of this country, and if you look at the statistics, ACEs is on the rise, which is adverse childhood experiences. These courts, by listening to fraud upon the court by attorneys, fraud upon the court by CPS, who may believe a child, or who use these standards of, oh, they have a black and blue, well, how do we know who's telling the truth? And they don't go to, they don't apply forensic social science research. They don't go to NYU or Columbia. Even in New York alone, we have all these resources, and yet all the money is being spent on unqualified experts that judges rely on. And the judges are issuing orders that transmit creating disabilities, transmit domestic violence, transmit ACEs, and result in children who are developing psychiatric problems, drug problems, not graduating school, and it's all because it all boils down to fraud upon the court and a system that is fact-based, that bases contested decisions by judges based on unsubstantiated fraudulent facts.
Now I've seen cases all over this country. I've visually seen them take a baby and give it to a heroin using party. I won't say mother or father, in many cases mother, sometimes father. I've seen them, and yet I've seen innocent, healthy, stable mother or father have no access to their children over and over again. We know that that's detrimental to a child.
Right.
Now we've seen these shootings, and we know the propaganda behind shootings, but there's also what we're seeing, and what we've been seeing, and you can kind of verify this, is that the majority of these children or young adults are foster care, psychotropic, drugged children. Am I right or wrong?
Yes, and they witness the violence because the courts are not stopping it, and the family courts, they're not stopping it, and they're basing decisions on he said, she said. Whoever has the better lawyer, or whichever lawyer the judge believes.
Or it's not even the better lawyer or the most expensive lawyer, because I've seen public pretenders win cases over and over again because they're fighting for the court and they're not fighting for the parties.
Correct.
Now, what are the other issues that this has caused our country on a whole? Okay, this is a very wealthy area here, right?
Yes.
So you have multi-million-dollar homes, families with
the North Shore, the Gold Coast.
Okay, and yet I can go into a very impoverished area and have the same dealings that you have here, only different but the same.
True.
Because it brings in money on anybody's backs. It doesn't matter. So poor families that are given public pretenders and all that kind of stuff and services and this and that and all that nonsense, multi-trillions are going filtered through on the backs of their children. Right. So they have no future, these poor children and families. Yeah. In wealthy areas like this, the real estate fraud, which is they're stealing houses all over here. So this is they see big dollar signs throughout here. So now everything families have worked for here, families that have worked for to get their homes and to keep building better homes for their children so they can go to better colleges and do good things for our country. So we can have people that prosper. It's destroying that too.
It is. So instead of issuing child support orders based on income and having factual background checks and forensic accounting, what they do is they say, well, the parties cannot agree, then this is just what we're issuing. Oh no, we don't do it that way. We don't follow child support enforcement guidelines. If the parties cannot agree, the houses get sold, which violates equitable distribution, and then they remove rights, and they appoint court-appointed receivers to strip your rights if you do not then abide by court orders to sell homes while you're trying to appeal a case. I have seen it all. And what they're doing is it'll follow the money. The lawyers get rich. And I have seen many cases when I have court watched and said, you try to work this out between yourselves. You don't want a judge deciding this for you. Yes, we do, but on facts, not on attorney reports while attorneys are making money. And the judges have said, when parties don't agree, if you cannot agree and you cannot do what's best for your children, then the lawyers will get all the money and you'll have a stranger deciding your fate. They don't want, this is unconstitutional.
Right, and we need, what I believe we need long-term is mediation type of forums for families to be able to bring something to the table that's good for everybody. Yes, so there are no victims or re-victimization. What else do you want to add to any of this?
Sure. I mean, the incredible outcomes to the families, it's atrocious, and I'll give you an example. You could have a set of protective parents or a single parent with multiple children, and one child has particular issues and the other child is thriving. So CPS makes allegations against the parent, and yet it's a like dichotomy, it's a conflict. So one child stays in the home, the other child is removed from the home. The child who is removed from the home causes so much trauma to the child or children left behind. And then in addition, the child who's staying at home doesn't understand, and then in some cases becomes angry, upset, and then I know of cases where CPS or some of these nonprofits that we have here in Long Island, one in Syosset, one in Amityville, and one out in Riverhead, the people who work for these organizations will literally alienate the children against the parents. Mm-hmm. So instead of fostering an environment of reconciliation, I don't even like that word reconciliation. I like family to bonding, family togetherness, like we do on Wall Street. There's a problem, I remediate it, I come up with a solution, we fix it, we lower the risk, we remove the risk, we move on, we strengthen the organization. We have resilience, right? Mm-hmm. Resilience training. None of these organizations have done this, and I have, as a parent, have pleaded with many of these nonprofits. I've gone to publicly elected officials. I've got, Representative P. King, shout out, has been wonderful in this regard, our U.S. Congressman. However, there are many elected officials who don't even know what is going on in the trenches. If you open up the hood and you look at it, it's incredible, the serpents, the snakes, like the lawyers who make so much money. I have watched a court-appointed attorney lie to a judge in Nassau County Family Court, where the protective mother turned to the lawyer and said, "You are lying because I did undergo that evaluation. Why are you lying to the judge?" And of course it all is recorded, and should be recorded. It's not always, right? It should be recorded. But they don't allow video recording, they don't allow any kind of audio recording. But the bottom line is, yes, we need accountability, we need transparency, we need an overhaul, we need to make sure that the focus is on the children and preserving the family. If a family is undergoing a difficult time, let's say, for example, the father works in construction, is addicted to painkillers, fell off the roof, the children are having issues, what social services or these government entities should do is help the family to get through it, not to remove children, traumatize the family. That is what's happening. And like Fran said, and as Vicki has attested, this is a money-making machine.
And I just want to add one thing. You spoke about resilience and fostering resilience and risk. That is exactly how evidence-based social work works. You have to reduce risks and build resilience. And that is not what they do when they evaluate children. Not at all.
Now today I'm going to tell you what I watched in this big court. Today I watched a bunch of CPS, Child Predator Services, and I've seen this before. They do this. They've been sued all over the country and they've lost. So I don't know why they're still that stupid to keep doing it. But I literally watched them provoke a person people that were talking, jump into their conversation, which was absolutely rude. Now they're public servants that are being paid by us. They're our employees because they're public servants. Mm-hmm. They forget that.
That's right.
Okay? And they not only did they invade the conversation, but they harassed the people having the conversation, and then they went and told that they felt threatened. What a joke. And I've seen repeatedly seen them do this. And I know that the viewing audience right now I'm sure I'm seeing a lot of comments later that will say, we've seen that over and over again too. There's been numerous lawsuits that they've lost. They didn't even have to make it to trial. They paid in advance because they knew they were wrong. They falsify records. They make up lies. Here's a big one. None of these caseworkers, and if they have a bachelor's, if they do, and you know what, your education level has nothing to do with your intelligence, okay?
Right.
And let's face it. But if they do have that, they still they have no right whatsoever to diagnose somebody with, and the funniest is undiagnosed mental illness. Like, what is that?
Exactly.
But where do they come off putting any diagnosis on any human being? You're violating ADA, you're violating HIPAA, you're violating
civil liberties,
all the civil liberties, and you're not a psychologist, a psychiatrist. You didn't do a forensic
and then
evaluation on a person. You have no right to diagnose. On top of it, as a public servant, to put that in writing on a government paper.
Correct, which the judges rely on
let's talk
as credible.
Okay, but what does that make the judge now? The judge, who is an administrator of a bank, because this is not a family court. I'm just, people know what this is. Let's talk about what this is.
He's the trier of fact. He's supposed to weigh the evidence, weigh the facts, and he does not. He just relies on CPS reports, on attorney reports. He considers it he said, she said testimony. and they feel that they cannot clog the system, that cases have to be moving, and they use a preponderance of the evidence standard, and they just rule, and they're destroying children's lives. And if you look at the research and the
Children and
statistics,
families.
how much have ACEs gone up? How much have gun
all going
shootings
up.
gone up? Everything's gone up. You know, the president talks about mental illness. These children are, instead of having children's best interests protected and being assessed for risk and resilience, they're issuing orders that totally do not even put that in the equation. And that's the missing element. We need to bring these courts into the 21st century, evidence-based judicial orders.
I can vouch that they are producing a youth that's becoming our next generation,
Yes.
that are falling apart. I am young. I'm young at heart. I'm not that far. You know, it's like I've always been around youth groups, and I love teenagers and kids and young adults and all that. And I've watched our children deteriorate.
Yes.
It doesn't matter what county or state I'm in. It doesn't matter if it's low income or high income. I have watched our children. They talk about the most perverted, perverse things. They know everything beyond what we know. Okay, things that we would not want. I've heard very few children are children anymore. It is so sad, and it's because this despicable system, this system that has deceived so many of us for so long, that we thought was a judicial system. How can you have a judicial system that's not a judicial system and allow it in this country? And they're producing drug addict children on all kinds of medication because they're not at peace. They don't know their identity. They've lost mom and dad. They've lost their whole biological family. And when you strip a child from all of everything that's supposedly their stability, okay, you can raise a child in a one-parent home and raise healthy, great kids.
But they don't do those risk assessments.
But they're not doing, and they're intentionally these professionals and these judges, so-called, and these child attorneys and Garnet Lytton liars, because that's what they are, these CPS worker liars, and all these people, all of them together don't make up one brain and one heart, not any of them.
They have an agenda.
They have an agenda, and they are destroying our children.
Yes.
They're destroying the next generation,
And
it
you
is
know how they're
robbing
getting
the
away with
Social
it?
Security Trust Fund. Therefore, our next generations of elders, okay, do not have a Social Security, there's no Social Security Trust Fund. So what good is what they're doing, and why are we as Americans allowing this?
Because there's a separation of state and federal, and just because matrimonial and family court are separate, state jurisdiction, exclusive jurisdiction, does not mean they can violate federal constitutional laws, ADA laws, civil liberties, and that's why you need to have federal oversight. You need to have everyone bring their stories out like you're doing, Fran, because this is destroying society. And just like the IRS, separation of state and federal, you can work in a state, you cannot not pay taxes. Okay, it's the rule of law, and they're violating the rule of law that this nation was founded on.
They're violating it all.
They're destroying
Violating it all.
society.
I've heard legislators say that they took an oath to the Constitution, and an oath to the state Constitution, and the only one they follow is the state. They believe that.
We're
That's
presenting
sick.
a solution. We're presenting, have oversight, have audits, have evidence-based forensic social workers do risk assessments, give the funding to Harvard, to Columbia, to NYU, to evidence-based practitioners.
Right.
Okay? And then adding domestic violence is a whole other piece to it too.
Well,
We have SEC, we have Wall Street, billions and trillions of dollars, right? Think about foreign exchange, real estate, mortgage fraud. The SEC, FINRA, U.S. Department of Treasury, OCC, commodities, all of these exchanges, they all have investigators. They all have fraud investigation teams. When I go to New York State and I try to find the New York State investigations team for fraud, I find the ombudsman, thank you, ombudsman, and that person covers a certain number of counties. However, there really there's no team of people who are well versed in fraud. So what happens is a case that we had in Nassau County on a public pension fraud case, it took over 10 years for the investigators to investigate and document and then have those individuals prosecuted for pension fraud. If we can find the banks where these money transfers are occurring, from the individuals and families that pay the what's called court-mandated child support to Albany in this case, and then the Albany then disperses those funds, what they call a reimbursement, back to, for example, Nassau County Department of Children and Family or what have you, a reimbursement. And we document this. I do believe, as I stated before, that it will shine the light. We'll be able to educate people about how this works. The other issue that I'm extremely concerned about is the abuse of big pharma. So you have, for example, a child who is in a state, what we call state approved or vendor nonprofit, for example, in Suffolk County. The child is having trouble sleeping because he or she has been taken from their family. And it hasn't even been signed off by a judge. I mean, the last time I checked, that's called kidnapping. And that child can't sleep. And so instead of using natural methods like lavender, talk therapy, helping that child to chamomile, exactly, they prescribe Seroquel. Seroquel is a harsh psychotropic drug that's used for people with
hallucinations,
for people like delusions and people who are schizophrenic.
That too.
Right, exactly. So it's
causes depression.
Right. If you research, so what we do as parents, we delve into deep research.
Right.
So you research with AstraZeneca, is the producer, and they've been sued, and it should never be prescribed to young men. It's highly dangerous. A child's brain is not even fully developed until 24, 25. Boys at the age of 17, 18, they tend to take on riskier behaviors. Their brain is still developing. A psychotropic drug is the last thing that should be in the body affecting their brain. And I wish I had studied neurology in college because I'm really fascinated by this. But again, that's another issue where these employees and doctors who are hired by the state and these nonprofits prescribe psychotropic drugs that also result in suicidal thoughts. One thing we haven't discussed with the shootings is all these warnings we hear about suicidal. What about homicidal tendencies? No one's talking about that, and I think it's time that we did.
And they're stripping us of their parental rights. So many people that we know, and they're giving it to experts that behind closed doors that we don't know their qualifications.
Listen,
we don't know
when you're being paid and you keep being paid, the longer you keep somebody's children, and you're being paid the more medication you put them on, and you're being paid every time a judge sees you, and you're being paid every time you have to give a service, you're not going to stop stealing people's children, and you're not going to do the right thing by those children or families. And when you're getting paid when somebody's divorced or break up of a relationship, means you get their house and everything they worked for, you're not going to stop. So it's up to us to make them stop. It's up to us to literally take what you're watching here today, if you've never seen it before, or if you're, like we are, constantly involved in this, to make it stop and to join us to help us to make this stop. Because our country, and I've been saying this for 2 years, and I watch it when somebody comes to me and said, Fran, I watched you for 2 years and now it's happening to me. I never thought it could happen to me. I've been warning you that it can happen to you. I don't care if you were a governor at one point. I don't care if you were a judge at one point. I don't care if you lived in, the worst neighborhood on the planet. This can and probably will happen to you too, or your neighbor or your loved one. So take this more seriously than you take anything in your life, because this means our families, and there's nothing more dangerous than this that's happening in this world right now. I don't think there's anything, and I've been saying it, more important than us focusing on the brilliant people that are out there that are working towards this goal to stop this abuse, because family court is a 100% gateway to child trafficking. It is the doorway.
It is, and there is a solution, but we have to take it out of the state's hands. The entity that created the problem and is not equipped to solve the problem, it doesn't have the capacity. It needs federal oversight.
Absolutely.
Yes.
You want to add anything before we
I
wrap?
wanted to say thank you so much for this opportunity, and again, some of the greatest solutions in our country and around the globe have been through collaborative processes. I am amazed and impressed by the people who have been part of this, and every day you refer to us. Even if you feel you can just do a little bit, or distribute an article, just check for the authenticity, because in some cases, there's a lot of misinformation out there as well. But follow the court cases. If you have a case that is a particular structure and fact pattern, look for similar cases. Look at the judge who is in your case and what she or he has decided, because you may garner knowledge that will be helpful for your own case. Thank you.
Yes, and I just wanted to also thank Fred for this opportunity. You do amazing work, and I know that you won't stop, and none of us will stop until this is resolved, and this destruction and this fraud and this system that has been taken over by, driven by money, power, and greed, is restored back to the people, that then becomes constitutional and civil rights based and focused on children's best interest developmentally first. And what I would advise people is when you go to court, always clarify with the judge what the attorney, if you have an attorney or you have an appointed expert, what was told to the judge, because there are some good judges out there that are being defrauded by the court, and I see it all the time. We know the truth, and yet they see what the lawyer's saying, the expert's saying, and they rely on it. No, we need a third party in there. We need evidence-based social workers, we need domestic violence experts, we need ADA advocates, and we need court watchers, and we need federal regulations.
So I want to just remind everybody that if you need our help, you can go to my website at punishedbeingaaparent.com /consultations. punishedbeingaaparent.com /consultations. You can also see a lot of great interviews on my on YouTube channel, Punished for, again, it's a number 4, protecting. And I also air actually right down here in Long Island, or in Lake Success, Long Island, on PATV, Panda TV, New York, Delta TV, Contra Costa, California, and a couple other little TV stations as well, which you'll find out about when you write me. I can send that list back to you as well. So we thank you guys for watching.
Thank you.
Family court is the gateway to child trafficking. Donald Trump needs to take this very seriously, and we need to end it. Thank you for both being here. It's been amazing. You guys are great. Thank you.
Thank you.